Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Amy Miller, and I'm the president of the Pharma Foundation. Thank you for joining me here today, where we will talk about industry options for you. Let me first start with telling you a little bit about the Pharma Foundation. We're a nearly 60-year-old organization, and we primarily provide grants and awards to early career biomedical researchers. Every year we get over 400 applications and we make only 40 awards. And so as a way of giving back, we've decided to start a webinar series that does a few different things. First, it introduces you to industry careers like we're doing today. Second, it helps you write a grant application like our webinar series next week. And third, introduces you to a variety of different aspects of the Pharma Foundation. So today I will introduce one of our panelists, and he will introduce the rest of the panelists. I'd like to welcome our panelists from Biogen. Ramon Jovine is Medical Director, Global Medical Affairs, and the Director of this program at Biogen. Ramon, take over, please.
Thanks so much for the introduction, Amy. Very good to be here. Let me just share my screen so you can all see my slides. Hopefully you can see that. So yes, as Amy was saying, my name is Ramon Jovine. In addition to my day job at Biogen as a medical director, I am the director of the postdoctoral/PhD fellowship program at Biogen in worldwide medical affairs. It's my great privilege to be here to talk to you about some alternative career paths, so potentially changing from academia into the pharmaceutical industry, as well as to describe our program. It is also my great joy to be joined today by a number of current fellows in that program, as well as people who have graduated from that program and who are now full-time employees at Biogen. And so I'd like to bring them on camera and on microphone to introduce themselves, starting from the top. Lauren Zajac, if you are here. Otherwise, Amanda. I'm not sure if Lauren was able to join us yet.
I am here.
Great.
Awesome. Thanks, Ramon. And hi, everybody. Really happy to be here today. My name's Lauren Zajac. I actually finished the fellowship quite a few years ago now. I've been at Biogen for 3.5 years. I started the fellowship right after I finished my PhD in neuroscience. And I've primarily worked in scientific communications and medical communications. And now I work in our digital health group in a number of medical affairs types of activities. So really happy to be here today.
And hi, everyone. I'm next on the list. I'm Amanda Clark, and I am as well, like Lauren, a former PhD fellow from Biogen. I transitioned to Biogen into the fellowship program about 2.5 years ago, and I came straight from my PhD as well in chemical biology. Not very big background in neuroscience, but a bit love of science nonetheless. So I've been primarily working in SciComms as well, publications and medical communications. And I work in the pipeline global scientific communications team at Biogen. So lovely to be here and speak with you all.
And then I am next on the list. Hello, everyone. My name is Catherine Kern, and I'm a second-year worldwide medical postdoctoral fellow. So have been mainly doing rotations in scientific communications and several other areas that we'll get more into detail with when Ramon goes through the slides. I finished my PhD 2 years ago in anatomy and neurobiology, and excited to share some experiences with you all today.
Hi, everyone. I'm next on the list. I'm Jack Renee Mays. I'm a first-year worldwide medical PhD fellow here at Biogen. I finished my PhD in neuroscience in Houston, Texas at the end of June of last year and joined in the fellowship at the end of July of last year. And I'm currently rotating in the U.S. Medical Director's Office for neuropsych. Excited to meet you guys.
Hi, everyone. I'm Alyssa Holt, and I'm the last one on the list. And so like Jack and I am also in my first year as a Worldwide Medical Fellow here. I finished my PhD last spring the University of Michigan in physiology. And so again, like Jack Renee and also like Katie, I've been rotating through several different areas within the company. So happy to be here and to share our experiences. Thanks.
Wonderful. Thank you all so much. And we'll get to hear a little bit more from our fellows past and present a little bit later in the presentation. But for the moment, I just have a few slides to share with you today. And then we can get around to Q&A, where we'll hopefully have a nice, robust exchange from our attendees. All right. So just briefly, the agenda, welcoming remarks, which we just went through, introductions, etc. Going to give the presentation, as I said, on the fellowship, sort of how it came to be, why it came to be, a little bit about my experience, which informed why the program came to be, and how I came to be involved with it. And then we'll end with a Q&A, as I mentioned, with myself and the current fellows and some of the alumni of the program. If you have questions throughout, we'll be monitoring the chat, so please drop them in and we will get to them at the end to answer. We also have some questions that we've accumulated over the years that we will also address potentially if people are shy to begin with. Yeah, we hope you'll come away edified at the end of it. All right, so just briefly a little bit about Biogen. We are pioneers in neuroscience. We're focusing on neurological and immunological diseases. We have a number of treatments that are approved on the market and a lot more on the way. For those of you who know a little bit about Biogen, you might know us as a multiple sclerosis company, which is what we're where we got our start and probably what we're most known for. We have 5 approved treatments on the market right now. But in recent years, we have expanded our reach. And so now we have treatments for spinal muscular atrophy, for example, Alzheimer's disease, which you may have heard about in the news lately, which we're very excited about. But there's also a number of other therapeutic areas where we have things that are coming down the pike quite quickly. For example, in the treatment of depression, the treatment of ALS, and things that are further back in the pipeline, but we hope to be able to speak to you about in years to come, looking at treatments for Parkinson's disease, other movement disorders, and various other kinds of neurological and immunological conditions. Okay, so that's enough about a commercial about Biogen, but we did want to mention it because it's an important bit of context about why we think this program took root here. Biogen is a scientifically focused company, always has been, has that reputation, and it's why I came to Biogen. And it's also, I think, why this program, which is specifically looking at folks who come from science backgrounds, doing research, are so welcome here, and why we want to bring them in to the company. Okay, so our particular program is about medical affairs, but people might not know what medical affairs is. And so we put together this slide, which I appreciate there's a lot going on here, so I'll try and walk you through it to try and put you or contextualize where worldwide medical affairs fits inside of a pharmaceutical company and in the drug development process. So if you look on the left side, this is where we start in basic research. This is where you're generating ideas and you're doing the first level of exploration, usually in cells or in animals. And there you're trying to find targets, trying to identify mechanisms and provide proof of those mechanisms. And then as you proceed to the right, you move into clinical development. So that is experiments in human beings, where you're trying to establish through the phase 1, 2, and 3 studies, safety and the proof of the mechanism, the proof of the concept, and then lastly, that you can provide that drug to human beings in a safe manner and actually show the benefit that you purport your drug to have. And then once you have shown that through phase 3 studies, usually you will make an application to a regulatory body like the FDA, who will then give you permission on the basis of the full scientific clinical development program and the evidence that's generated there to give your drugs to people on the market. And this is where medical affairs starts to come into play. So if you look at the top there, there's the clinical development blue bar that sort of shrinks, and worldwide medical, which is green, sort of starts to expand. And so we take the baton from clinical development as we get closer to approval and out into the market. And we take over generating and communicating data that support the drugs that we produce. And we give them to physicians, patients, healthcare providers, payers, other people who are stakeholders in the healthcare system, so that they can make good decisions about how to deliver those drugs to patients and to deliver the maximum benefit to them. So, as I was saying, at a broad level, that's what medical affairs job is to do, is to generate and deliver this information to meet unmet medical needs. The purpose of that is to inform real-world medical practice. So when physicians are there treating their patients, the information that we're generating and giving to them is supposed to help them do that job better. And ultimately, we hope that then that improves the outcomes that patients have. How do we do that? Well, there's a variety of different things that falls under this umbrella of medical affairs. And so I've listed a few of them here at the bottom to give you a flavor. Scientific communications is something that you probably are aware of from your own careers, right? This is like manuscripts, posters, abstracts, and so on. We do that too at pharma companies. We generate a lot of data and we want to communicate that to the community. And so, you know, we submit posters to conferences, we write manuscripts and we get them published. And that's a primary way that we get that information out there. We also take that information from the primary literature and synthesize it into different kinds of different media that can then be carried by people directly who work for our company out into the field when they speak with physicians, for example. Some of you may be familiar with the role known as the medical science liaison. So it's their job to talk directly to physicians and answer their questions. And they often take these resources that have been created from primary literature with them when they go to talk to them. We also create and design, conduct phase 4 trials, which are clinical trials, meaning trials with human beings, and other kinds of data generation efforts. So, for example, interrogating claims databases or other sorts of data sources to generate answers to scientific questions that we still have about how to best deliver our drugs to patients. And we then carry the results of those studies, again, through scientific communications of various kinds, so that we can inform physicians and other healthcare stakeholders. We also do a lot of medical education, so not specifically about our drugs, but about the disease areas in which we are involved, to help teach physicians about the latest and greatest in the treatment landscape and advances in the treatment and diagnoses of various diseases. This helps physicians to keep up to date in their own education and be able to treat their patients effectively, and isn't specific to our particular drugs, but is helpful in general in improving the care that they're able to deliver in the therapeutic areas in which we work. Medical information is another example. This is a group of people within our company who are responsible to answer questions that come to us directly. So either via the phone or email or some other route like that, asking about our drug. We are required by law to answer those inquiries in a rapid manner, and we do so by leveraging the internal and external data sources that we have at our disposal to make sure that those questions get answered. So again, that's just a brief flavor of kind of the things that medical affairs does. And as you might intuit, it's quite well suited to folks like yourselves who are coming from doctoral backgrounds. Okay, so just a little bit about me. I promise I won't make it a long story, but just to give you again some context of like how this program came to be and why it's personally very motivating to me, and why I wanted to found this program and have been working on it for the last several years. So I got my undergrad degree, then got a PhD degree from Boston University in neuroscience. And as I was coming to the end of my studies, I was sure, I had concluded that I did not want to remain in academia. I didn't want to stay at the bench and continue to do research, but I really wasn't sure what kind of opportunities were out there for me. And back then, there weren't quite as many resources available to folks like me looking for careers outside of academia. The assumption still was that you would get a postdoc and you'd get on that track and eventually have your own lab and so on. And so taking stock of like what I liked and what my skills were, I thought about, what can I do? I liked writing. I liked the end part of the scientific process, synthesizing what we'd done, what we'd learned, and how we interpret that. So like, writing manuscripts and the like. And so I thought maybe I could do something in science writing. So a lot of my early career was kind of casting about doing scientific communication related things, but without really much direction, I guess you might say. I was taking this sort of windy path that you see here, right, where I stumbled into an initial job with this company, Natural Standard, which was a small medical publishing company, as a writer and editor of scientific materials. And then from there, I went to work for Tufts Medical Center and their Institute for Clinical Research and Health Policy Studies for a while, doing, again, writing, editing, and some research. And then eventually getting to a company called Adelphi Values, which is a healthcare consultancy that would partner with pharma companies. They would provide services to them on demand and by contract. And that was my first exposure to the industry. And it was really wonderful in that I learned like, oh, there's a whole huge world out there, of science and research and kind of work that they're doing that I can be a part of, leveraging the skills that I earned in doing my PhD, but not at the bench. I very much liked the work that I did there, but it was a bit mercenary in that, you didn't have ownership of the particular projects. You sort of went where the money was, where the customer was. And I really wanted to feel like the things that I was contributing to were mine, or that I was part of it. And so I wanted to be inside of industry. And fortunately from there, I ended up with more direction and started a role as a publications manager at Ariad Pharmaceuticals, which is an oncology company. And then from there came to Biogen, where I've been for the last 7 years. And almost immediately from coming into pharma, I was like, this is where I should have been to begin with. And I spent a sort of a long time wandering in the wilderness before I made it to the place where, I was doing the job that I wanted to do when I grew up. And in coming to Biogen, I was acutely aware of like just how long and windy my path was to get there. And I knew from having worked alongside some folks who came through a pharmacy degree background, who had a fellowship program, that they brought in wonderful candidates, and that these people had a very direct way into industry. They got to learn the ropes in a sort of lower stakes environment for a couple of years. And then often we get hired into the company. I was like, man, I wish something like this had existed when I was coming out of school. I would have saved myself a lot of time. And it would have been a great learning experience and a great way into the industry, which can be somewhat hard to break into directly from a PhD. And so I said to myself, well, let's see if I can't start a program like this at Biogen. And it is the credit to this company and to my leadership when I brought the idea to them that they said, that sounds great, go do it. And they gave me the latitude and some resources, and I went out and started the program. Initially, like literally going door to door at local universities and being like, hey, I'm starting this program. Can I talk to your students about it? And what I found was that there was a great hunger for this kind of program and for alternative career paths in general. And we have since grown the program over the last several years from a small kind of local kind of thing to a bigger program where we've graduated a number of people who have now joined the company as full employees. And we're now nationally advertised. We're on Biogen's website. We are communicating via Biogen's social media presence, and getting applications and candidates from all over the country. And some of them we will speak to a little bit later today. So, okay, enough about me and where and why the program came to be. Let me tell you a little bit about the actual program. So it's a paid, you get a salary, 2-year fellowship in worldwide medical. The purpose of it is to give you hands-on experience in a couple different areas within medical affairs, and hopefully to serve as a launching point for a long and successful career in pharma. And hopefully with Biogen, we like to retain the people that we bring in through the program. Ideally, the candidates that would come would be like folks like yourselves who come with strong scientific acumen, who have completed their PhDs and are looking for a career in industry potentially. We try to look at, for people who are earlier in their careers. So, people who are either coming directly out of their programs or maybe have spent a little bit of time doing postdocs, but haven't yet settled on a career. They're interested in a fast-paced work environment. They don't want to necessarily be siloed. They want to work with lots of people. They need to have talents and aptitude and a desire to build relationships and to work collaboratively, which is central to everything that we do in medical affairs. And they have an aptitude to organize, synthesize, interpret, and a love of communicating complex scientific information. The fellowship is structured such that it's a 2-year program. New classes enroll every year in July. There are 2 parallel programs at Biogen, and I mentioned them just to let you know that there's like a wider fellowship community. The PharmD program, which I mentioned before, runs at Biogen, and actually it met in a number of pharma companies. But I think unique to Biogen, I haven't heard of very many programs that are similar that hunt for PhDs specifically. We also have a sister program for PhDs. It lasts for 2 years and is made up of a number of rotations. So in the first year, you're going to have 1, 2, 3 core rotations. So these are going to be rotations specifically within medical affairs. And I've listed a couple of options of what those things could be. So you could spend some time working in scientific communications, working on publications or medical communications. You can spend some time in the medical director's office, where I'm currently working, for example, doing evidence generation, working with key medical experts. That's what KME stands for. Doing medical education, which I talked about before. You could spend some time in medical information. You can work some time in operations. You could do training. You could do work with our Congress team, which are the people who help manage our presence at these scientific congresses. So there's a whole host of things that you can pursue based on your interest and based on business needs. And then for the last rotation in your first year is an elective one. And we give people the opportunity to rotate somewhere outside of medical affairs, so you can get that perspective of like how medical affairs interacts with other parts of the company and what other parts of the company are up to. And some of these things, this is not a comprehensive list, but I list a few here for flavor again. You could spend time with our value and access team, who are the people who work with payers. So like they're the people who decide whether your drug gets reimbursed, whether your drug gets added to a hospital's formulary, things like that. They do lots of analyses and work in that group for that purpose. You could work in marketing as part of our commercial organization within the company. You can work in clinical development. So if you want to go earlier, you want to do something more scientific, you can do that as well. You can work in business development, supply chain management, safety and regulatory sciences, digital health, where Lauren Zajac, for example, is in right now. That's where her permanent job is. So there's lots of opportunities to see different things in the company. And then the last year is a longitudinal rotation. So you spend a whole year in a particular group. Usually you're embedded in one of the rotations that you had as part of the first year. but it doesn't have to be that way. And the hope then is that you gain a long-term experience in something that you gravitated toward, and hopefully can turn into a job at the end of your fellowship. All right, so to give you, again, an example of what it's like to be a fellow and the kinds of things that we're working on the next couple slides, we have a few example projects from folks who are on the call that I'm going to call them onto the phone to give you a little bit of a description. But the top level takeaway is that you are a real, full, embedded member of the teams on which you are going to be rotating with. This isn't like an internship where you're making photocopies or getting coffee or something like that. You do real work, and that real work, translates into projects and things that are important to the company, and that are actually things we intend, to deliver either internally or externally to our customers. Okay, so Amanda, I'm going to call you onto the video if you're available to tell us a little bit about your project.
Yes, thank you so much, Ramon. So hi, everyone. During my first year of my fellowship program experience, I had a similar experience of rotating in the medical director's office, which is where Ramon is currently at in his role. But I did this in our US organization side and on the Alzheimer's disease team during my fellowship time. And so during that rotation, I was really working very closely with my preceptor, who is a medical director, to help support localization of our medical materials. So materials that get made by Global Scientific Communications will go on to all the different various countries or affiliates, as we call them. And then they get reviewed by the local country specific laws and regulations. So I was helping to coordinate that process and flow of materials from Global to the US organization at the time, and oversee the review process, help address comments if they come up, particularly around like legal and regulatory review of materials. I was working very closely as well with the field team and hearing the insights that they were gathering from their experiences from the MSLs when they were going out and engaging with HCPs. And then I was also helping work internally with the medical directors to develop advisory boards. So if we have a particular topic that we would like to know more on and would like to better understand the space in the area, we can engage with healthcare professionals and invite them as our experts, and they work as advisors with us, and we develop and talk about the discussion. So it was kind of a lot of behind the scenes items and work for those projects, but it was tons of fun and very informative. So thanks, Ramon.
Thanks very much, Amanda. Lauren.
Thanks, Ramon. So the project example that's listed on this slide was from one of the rotations that I did outside of medical affairs, and this was a rotation in late stage clinical development at Biogen. And this was for, again, an asset that was in development. So the phase 2 study was basically coming to an end. And basically when you are at that stage, there are a lot of activities that are initiated and ongoing that are basically related to preparing for a potential phase 3 trial based on the readout of phase 2. So I was doing a rotation with the medical director that was leading this study at Biogen. And, this was something I guess I'll share this context because it kind of shares a little bit more about, the experience of working in clinical development. You typically have a medical director who's leading the study at the pharmaceutical company. And then you have a lot of other functions at Biogen that play different roles in the execution of the study. You then have a contract research organization, which basically helps execute the study. And then, of course, you have the clinical trial sites. So you can basically imagine the medical director who's responsible for the study at Biogen is kind of the key decision maker, with a lot of the other parties responsible for execution. So now that I've given you that context, one of my projects during this rotation was summarizing protocol deviations that had happened in the phase 2 trial, since it was coming to the end, looking at the totality of these and, trying to mitigate deviations in a potential phase 3 trial. The reason that this is important is because when you have a lot of protocol deviations, one, just from a regulatory perspective, that doesn't look good. You should be conducting the trial according to the protocol as much as possible. But the other reason that is potentially an issue is because of noise. So if, the data that kind of are being collected that end up being the data that are the primary endpoint of the trial, which determine whether or not it was a successful trial, are not being collected in the same way or as close to the same way across sites, you have more noise in your measurement. So yeah, that's a little bit about this project, and hopefully a little more context to give you a flavor of clinical development as well.
Thank you very much, Lauren. Katie.
Hi again, everyone. So the project that I have put on here is from my longitudinal rotation. So I am currently actually working with Ramon specifically in data generation on a depression asset that we are hoping to bring to launch in the near-term future. And the project that I talked about was designing a study that we would run after launch of the drug. So this is a phase 4 observational trial for the collection of real-world data and the observation of associated treatment patterns in MDD patients. And so essentially, as all of you likely know, in the clinical development program, and as Lauren just mentioned, things are very tightly regulated. So we want the data to be as clean as possible, which means there's a lot of inclusion and exclusion criteria. We're looking for very unique and specific patients to take the drug. And then there is really a question as to when the drug gets into the real world. Will it still work? Will it still be safe? And what do the data look like? And so what I've been working on for this project is I've been coming up with the study design for this project or the study design to look at a trial where we're looking at the drug in the real world. And so that has involved looking at specific outcome measures that are of interest, thinking about how frequently we should collect specific outcome measures, thinking about whether these measures should be collected digitally or in person with a clinician visit, and doing different things like that. So that's really fun if you're interested in thinking about scientific questions and designing studies in order to get at those scientific questions.
Fantastic. Thank you, Katie. Jacqueline.
Okay, thanks, Ramon. So my project that I put on here as an example was my preparation of an integrated evidence generation plan in my last rotation in the Global Medical Director's Office for Multiple Sclerosis, Neurological and Autoimmune Disorder. So kind of going off of what Katie had just mentioned about the importance of data generation, aside from the data that Biogen itself generates, we also get quite a few proposals, especially for our already marketed assets for different studies that can be done for these assets. For example, the specific asset that I worked on has been on the market for almost 2 decades now, so quite a while. And I guess during, when I was in academia, I was thinking that the traditional way that a drug came to market is that you do your clinical trials and it kind of stops there, but there's a lot that goes into life cycle management. So we'll get these proposals from quite a few other academic or hospital institutions that are related to whatever asset that we have. So for example, maybe the asset currently, we want to see if the efficacy remains based on the route of entry change or the dosing schedule, or even seeing based on the mechanism of action, whether this drug could be used for a different neurological or immunological disorder that's related to the same mechanism. So my goal was to ensure that these proposals were sound and ensure that our resources at Biogen are going to studies that actually align with our strategic imperatives and our focus on patient care.
Thank you, Jacqueline. And again, last but not least, Alyssa.
Thanks so much, Ramon. Great. So yeah, so this quote here is describing the project that I am doing in my current rotation. And so sort of like Amanda had mentioned, typically when we think about how we educate people on different topics that are related to the assets that are in development. We do a lot of different symposium and medical education outreach. And so the project that I'm describing here, as I mentioned, is in my current rotation. And so here we're looking at a drug that's being developed in the depression space. And so for my project, I was really involved in helping develop the content for the symposium that we're putting on, sort of about education in the space of depression. And when we do these symposium, we often like to invite key medical experts, or KMEs. So these are people who are sort of the best in the field, who know a lot about the different area, to be our sort of content matter experts. And so I've been involved in trying to identify these speakers, as well as do sort of more of the nitty-gritty logistical work, the contracting, and then leading these kickoff calls to sort of talk about the content that will be presented in the symposium, sort of what we're hoping to include from a medical education standpoint, what the key medical experts would like to include based on their experiences, and then just sort of wrap it all up in something that is a great and helpful and educational product for the upcoming Congress. So that's what that project is about. Thanks.
Thank you, Alyssa. So a really nice selection of example projects. As you can see, they're all interesting and important in their own way to the business, and not, toy projects, but real things that contribute to the success of our business and our mission. Okay, so a couple stats before we close out. The fellowship in total has graduated 22 fellows out of the worldwide medical program. This is across both the PhD and PharmD program. And we have almost a 70% retention rate. And we would love to keep them at Biogen after they finish and give them full-time jobs. But 100% of those folks go on to a job at some pharma company. So we have a really great record. And to follow on to that, you've already met the current fellows, which are on the left, but we've also listed the alumni on the right, color-coded according to what their current status is. So folks who are in green are people who graduated from the fellowship program and worked at Biogen for a time and have since departed to some other lucky employer. Folks in blue are people who went through the program and are still with Biogen, many of them years and years later. Folks in gray are people who graduated from the program and went on to, again, other lucky employers, unfortunately not Biogen. But again, 100% success rate in placing people into pharma careers, and we're really lucky to have had time with all these folks. Okay, lastly, just some logistical details. If you are at all interested in applying to our program, we would love to have you. The current year's application process is still open. It's open until the end of March. Please submit your resume and cover letter, and combine them into one document, on Smart Recruiters, which you can actually get to by following this QR code. You can also find it on our website. If you do a Google search for the PhD Fellowship Program, there's a link there that will also take you to this. You can also find it via our social media presence. So you can check us out on Twitter, or on LinkedIn. You can also reach out to us directly. I'm going to give you the email address in just a moment. But if you're interested, yes, please do apply by the end of the month, and we will be enrolling a new class by July. If you are still deep in your studies and are planning to apply in the future, just be aware that our application process is usually open from January 1 to March 31st every year. All right. And now we'll move on to our Q&A. But if you do have any questions, as I said, that don't get answered here today, or maybe you're just not appropriate for the forum, whatever, you can always reach out to us via this email address at the bottom, which is what I and the other fellows monitor. All right. Thank you. You've been a very lovely, quiet audience, but we're very much looking forward to your Q&A now.
Hi, Ramon, and thank you so much for finishing up that presentation. I think the webinar was scheduled for the 45 minutes, but I'm hopeful that for those who can stay on, I think the Biogen side, if it's okay with the pharma team, we are available, I believe, until up to the top of the hour. So happy to take any, I see one question has come in, and then we do have a handful of others that we can go ahead and provide you with of other questions that we typically get. I do want to just give a shout out that I have put a link to our survey in the chat. So if folks are interested and you'd like to give some feedback on how our presentation went or the Q&A, we would love for you to, access that link and provide your responses at your convenience. So thank you so much. And so Ramon, we've got some questions coming in now. And so one question is on approximately how many applications we typically get per year. And then I'm guessing it would be great if you would be able to also add just typically like how many at each stage and typically how many offers.
Perfect. Thanks, Amanda. And thanks also for reminding me for the plug for the post-session survey. We'd love it if you could fill it out and tell us a little bit about what your thoughts of our presentation were. On to the questions though. How many applicants do we get per year? It's been going up, but we're roughly in the sort of like 100 so applications, which isn't as many as you might fear, but since we don't have a lot of spots, might also sound kind of discouraging. I hope it won't discourage you. You should absolutely apply. We had lots of fantastic candidates, and people come from all sorts of backgrounds, as you've heard, and don't feel like you don't have the right background necessarily. You don't have to be a person who interned at a pharma company or whatever to be considered. Quite the opposite. We look for a diversity of candidates. Of those people who put in their applications, we usually invite about 10 or so for phone interviews, for an initial phone interview. And then from that, winnow it down to a group of 4. And those 4 people come in for in-person interviews. During the pandemic, it was virtual, but we might be going back to actually in-person interviews this time around. And of those 4, we often extend offers from 2 to 3 of them, where we enroll in July. I actually can see, as opposed to our normal technology, the questions popping up here, Amanda, so I can just kind of cruise through them. Is there any citizen restrictions for fellowship? No, we don't have any citizenship restrictions. However, you do have to be authorized to work in the United States. So we can't sponsor visas of any kind, unfortunately. So if you are on some other kind of visa where you have work authorization through the full 2 years of the fellowship program, you are absolutely welcome to apply. What's the average day-to-day of a fellow? That's a great question. Let's ask Katie. Katie, why don't you tell them what your day-to-day is like?
Hello again, everyone. Yeah, I'm happy to give an overview of the day-to-day, and I feel like I'll try and tie in a little bit of the project that I talked about. But so, for example, what I will do tomorrow, the day often does start off with some meetings. So as I mentioned, right now I'm on the data generation team. So I start off with a call that has cross-functional colleagues that are all involved in data generation. So this may be colleagues in the medical director's office, or colleagues in epidemiology and clinical development, as well as some of our colleagues in value and access, for example. So some more commercial, some research and development, and then also some medical affairs. And so that's just one example of a 30-minute meeting. I tend to have several of those throughout the day. And then from there, I also get to do work on the projects that I'm actually doing. So things like the phase 4 observational study is something that I'm working on, as well as doing some post hoc analyses. So other things that we have mentioned and talked about generally is that looking at the clinical development program and understanding what gaps there still are in the data, we need to do additional analyses to fill those gaps. And so what I might do, I might look at a specific question that I'm having about the data. I then look in the scientific literature, think about how other people have asked similar questions. I might then create a statistical analysis plan with my biostats colleagues. And then from there, think about the interpretation of the results that we have for those data. So that's kind of an overview of different types of things I might be thinking about in a day. You'll notice that one thing I really want you to take away from that is that it's highly collaborative. So I'm very rarely working in my own bubble. I'm often talking to people in lots of different functions within Biogen, and pretty much all of my work is like that. So that's a good overview of the day-to-day. And last thing I'll add is that it is typically within the realm of 9 to 5. So we're all encouraged to sign off at a reasonable time and to work in ways that are healthy and good for us, for our families, and for those around us.
Fantastic answer. And I'm really glad you touched on that last point, Katie. But as she was summarizing, I think that Katie's day is very typical of not only the fellows sort of day to day, but also day to day in medical affairs in general. You spend a lot of time working with your colleagues who are all really bright, smart, knowledgeable, and driven people. And you work together to accomplish your various objectives. Much of that, time spent together is in meetings, as she said, and then there's some portion of your day which is spent on, sort of heads down individual kind of thinking and other kind of desk work like that. All right, let's move on. Is there bench work involved during the rotations? No, there is no bench work. Worldwide Medical Affairs is a non-sort of scientific, or sorry, I shouldn't say non-bench, kind of role. Now, through one of your external rotations, if you spend some time with clinical development, for example, you might be a little bit closer to the science. And in the sense that you're designing trials that might be conducted in human beings and whatnot, but otherwise no. If you're interested in a sort of a bench career, we do have postdoctoral programs where you can come join the research part of the company if that's of interest to you. But the fellowship program is for medical affairs. What does the initial onboarding training for the fellowship look like? That's a great question. So we usually bring people in and try and give them as gentle an introduction as we can, because we know it can be kind of a shock going from an academic background to coming into working your first real sort of industry job. And so what we do is we encourage people to have lots of meetings with people that they have interest in and potentially having rotations with. So, they'll have conversations with me, they'll have conversations with the fellows who are here already and who are, in full-time roles at the company to get a sense of what possibilities are out there. And we encourage them to have lots of meetings. We give them some, traditional kind of PowerPoints and other written material to read through to get a sense of what what life at Biogen is like how do you navigate, the corporate life? How do you use your Outlook? How do you use the various electronic and internet tools that we use and things like that? But after that, once you've sort of gotten acclimated, we try and place folks in an initial rotation where they're either spending time with me or one of the people who have already been involved in the program, so they can sort of get a smooth ramp up, with somebody who's gone through the experience themselves. And in that way, they can get up to speed. And from then, you're sort of off into the races. And throughout the time here, it's not like those things stop. You get lots of formal and informal training opportunities. Some of it, specific to the place that you're rotating. So if you're in a particular therapeutic area, there are standing educational programs that can bring you up to speed on that particular therapy area and the drugs that we produce and the data that surround them, but also other things too, like how to speak with physicians, for example, if you're interested in an MSL career. We encourage people to continue talking to people, both as part of their current role, but also to seek out informal and formal mentors. So that ability to network is a big part of the program and the value I think that it brings to people who join the program, and is all part of how we acclimate people to life at Biogen. Okay, for grad students directly applying out of grad school, are papers publications considered of more or similar importance compared to experience, skills, and techniques? So publications are definitely a thing that you should cite on your resume and your application. We like to see that you have that experience. Of course, most people who would come through a PhD program will have some of that experience. So it's a component. I wouldn't say it's the whole of it. It's not necessarily the most important part of it either. I think harkening back to the earlier part of the presentation, the things that I was highlighting about looking for people who have a demonstrated ability to collaborate and to work together to achieve some end, and to communicate information and complex information to a variety of audiences. Those are really key core skills that you need. And there are lots of kinds of experiences that you can use to show that you have those qualities. So writing papers is part of that. But I think other ways that you could demonstrate it is saying, I spearheaded an interlab collaboration, which resulted in 5 successful experiments, two publications, and a patent, and pioneered a new method of isolating a particular bacterium or something like that, right? That's like a really fantastic way of quantifying the benefit or the impact that something you did had, and also showing that you have to have the skills to be able to negotiate among a bunch of different people a successful collaboration. It's by no means the only example. There are lots of other things you could potentially be doing. You could be teaching, for example. That's another great way of showing that you have those skills. You could be doing volunteer work. The sky's the limit, really. It's about communicating that you have those abilities with the experiences that you have. Can you expand further on how the core rotations work? Do fellows interview with specific teams, and how does supervision work? Thank you. Yes, that's a great question. So it's a little bit like selecting your PI. Might have been like, you have conversations with various people throughout the company. So as I was saying, when you were brought on board, we talked to you. I have a standing meeting with all the fellows regularly. And I learn more about what their interests are, and I tell them about the company. And then I say, oh, you're interested in this? If you want this particular experience, try and talk to these people. And you'll set up these calls, and you'll have conversations with people. And through those series of conversations, you'll find that you have a bit of a meeting of the minds, potentially with someone where you're like, okay, I think I'd like to work with this person. The stuff that they're doing is interesting, and that person has work that they would like to do, and they would like to bring you in, and they have the opportunity to bring you in. And you decide, like, I'm going to go spend a couple months there. And that's sort of how those rotations are set up. You will have regular interactions with that person as part of your day-to-day work. And I encourage all the fellows to set up regular touch points with the person who's overseeing their rotation directly in the work that they're doing. But as I said before, you have regular meetings with me throughout. I'm ultimately responsible for your success in the program. And so I constantly meet with all the fellows to make sure that their day-to-day work is going well, but also that they're able to connect to the people that can help set them up in their subsequent rotations, and also to just answer general career development questions and provide mentorship. I also encourage them to set up similar sort of non-formal mentorships and networks of people that they like to talk to at the company. They of course have their own fellows to talk to who are currently in the class with them, as well as fellows who have since graduated the program. Maybe I'm speaking, I should rather let the fellows speak for themselves, but I think they've become quite close, a lot of them. They're a real tight network, which I think they all appreciate. Okay, what makes an applicant stand out? I think this is sort of calls back to the previous answer I gave, that we're not looking for any one specific kind of experience. It's really about communicating to us, what experiences have you had that show that you would thrive and excel in this kind of role? Again, it's very deep on collaboration, and it's very much about communicating, synthesizing scientific information. And so there are lots of experiences that you can have that can show those things. So put them together on a resume and write them in a compelling way. Try and be succinct, try and be quantitative if you can, and try and use active verbs to show like what role you played. I drove this, I led this, I connected these people, whatever impact or role you played in that particular thing, and that will show us that you're a good candidate. And a lot of people who are looking for these roles, or for looking for a path out of academia, like it's evident in the things that they've been doing. Like they've been talking to people who are, have roles that they like and so on. So I encourage you to do that sort of legwork offline, besides your resume. Like talk to the people who are in the positions that you might think about having one day. and learn more about them. Attend talks like this, and learn more about it. This will help you talk the lingo and will also better inform, your own career aspirations and what you're looking for. What are some of the most important skills you use in your day-to-day roles? This is a great question. Lauren, why don't you tell us what are some of the most important skills you use in your day-to-day roles?
Thanks, Ramon. Happy to weigh in on this. I guess what I'll start with, and I'll see if anything else kind of rises to the top of the list for me, but communication. I think, just being a clear communicator in general, but also being, good at scientific communication is just a foundation to any role in medical affairs. So that's definitely, I think what I would say is the most important day to day, no matter what the task. Kind of circling back to what Katie shared, and I think what I touched on in my example project. The work in industry is extremely collaborative and cross-functional, meaning that folks, coming from different perspectives, with different roles are coming to the table regularly to drive projects forward toward the bigger goals. So yeah, you can imagine that clear communication is really central to that. I'm trying to think if anything else kind of comes to mind. Perhaps I'll pause there, and if anyone else on the panel wants to speak to another key.
Yeah, anyone else want to jump in? Thanks, Lauren.
Mm-hmm.
Ramon, I'll just quickly add organization as well, like just general project management. Organization is also top skills on top of the communication. But I know that we are close to time too, so happy to hand it back over to Amy, I believe, or you, Ramon.
Yes, let me just zoom through a couple quick answers to the questions that have popped up, and then yeah, I want to make sure that we're not running Amy out of time here. How much is a stipend? What are the other benefits? So it's not a stipend, but a salary. You're paid like an employee. You have benefits, so like health and vision and dental. You get a commuter benefit, meaning you get reimbursed for like taking mass transit or riding your bike or other things. There's a whole host of benefits that are associated with it. It's quite nice. The salary is generous. It's superior to all the postdocs that I'm aware of by quite a nice margin. You're paid well enough to be pretty comfortable in the Boston area. So I think it's quite a good deal. If you're if the financial aspect is worrisome for you, I think you don't have to worry about that. Are fellows required to be on the Biogen campus? We do require people be in the Boston area because we are all considered hybrid employees, meaning that there are times that we need to be in the office. So we require people to be within range of the office should they need to be in the office. Now, practically speaking, most of us don't work every day in the office. Like myself, I work remotely most of the time, though I do come in on an occasion. Are there opportunities for advancement within the company? Yes, absolutely. You can look at me as the prime example. I started out as a publications manager, got promoted a couple times to an associate director of scientific communications. I'm now a director, a medical director, which is a different kind of role, but also considered a promotion. Amanda herself has been promoted in her scientific communications role from a manager role to a senior manager role relatively recently. And there's lots of examples outside the fellowship of people that I know who have changed all sorts of different careers within medical affairs. Some people who worked in the field as medical science liaisons and have come inside the company and are now medical directors or work in scientific communications, and vice versa, and pretty much anything in between. We love to keep people and promote them if we can. Would you recommend a resume or CV? Resume, absolutely. This is a job, apply for it as a job rather than an academic role. And I think that's it. I think I heard Amy trying to break in.
Oh, I was laughing because you were funny. Thank you, Raymond. I appreciate your time and the rest of the panel. I think we're going to move on to our slides. So I want to thank everyone who hung in today for the surprise 15 minutes. We could have gone on for another 15. It was fantastic. So thank you so much. You're watching a seminar series that is called Exploring Career Paths and Honing Professional Skills. The next one is in 2 weeks' time, how to write a standout letter of intent and application, in case you are still curious in getting postdoctoral funds or early career funds. And next slide shows you our YouTube channel. If you are interested, AbbVie did one for PhDs and PharmDs. Their program is really new, not quite as advanced as Biogen, and they too have a 100% success rate of their fellows staying in industry, if not AbbVie itself. And then the WIN award you see below is for MD PhDs who are interested in being clinical trialists for underrepresented populations. It's a very interesting program. And if not for you, then maybe you know someone who is interested in being a clinical trialist. That one too is paid for 2 years. And then we do have tips for writing award-winning grant applications. And they're pretty basic tips. So if you want to watch Peter Newman just tell you how to capture a reader's attention, it's not very long and it's an engaging presentation. So next, I want to thank all of our supporters. As you can see, Biogen is a proud supporter and has been for a very long time of the Pharma Foundation. Every cent we raise from these companies, we give away to researchers annually. We are 60 years old, so our operating costs come from a trust. Next. We are easy to reach. You can see us here, and please reach out to us through social media and follow us on these platforms. Thank you so much for your time, and I hope you have a great day.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to be here, Amy. Appreciate it.